Okay. It's hard to believe that we're just, like I said, a few weeks away from Rosh Hashanah. And one of the things that every year kind of gets me, it's hard for me to kind of deal with on the holidays is like, we walk in, we pick up our Machzor, we literally like dust it off because we haven't touched it in a whole year since last Rosh Hashanah, because why would we? It's a Machzor for Rosh Hashanah. And then we just expect that if we open it up, that all of the prayers are just going to come back to us, and all the melodies will come back to us, and all the meaning will come back to us, and it'll just be the most amazing tefillot. And most years that's the case, right? Like if we're lucky. But I want to spend time over the next couple of weeks trying to dig a little bit deeper into the tefillot. There is like so much to talk about. I mean, like probably one of my most favorite topics. There's so much to analyze, from the tefillot themselves to the structure of the tefillot, and we're going to try to get through a lot. Your source sheets look like there are a lot. There's a lot on the source sheets, and some of it we'll do tonight, some of it we'll do next week, and then I'll keep adding to the source sheets depending on how far we get this evening. Also, by way of introduction, when we think of the word Machzor itself, what does Machzor mean? Like, what's the root of the word Machzor?
It's a cycle. It's good enough. It's only modern time that we call Machzor the therapist for the home.
Correct.
In the Middle Ages, people could Machzor, and Machzor was really for the whole cycle of the book. It was a huge book of 2 sets of books, basically for the Hashanah. And included the tefillot for the whole year, starting
Correct.
every day, Shabbat, if you look online, Machzor, Machzor, Worms,
that was a rhetorical question.
No. It's so what Aryeh is saying, for those who couldn't hear, what Aryeh is talking about is the word Machzor literally means like a cycle, to like review something, right? You review a cycle, and once upon a time, before the printers wanted to, I don't want to say make more money, God forbid, but before they wanted to break it up into more volumes, it's true, there was like one book, and it had everything for the whole cycle of the year. This is correct. One of my most favorite memories of all time is we growing up, I think many shuls used the red Birnbaum Machzor. I don't know if that was used here in Riverdale. In Chicago it was. Yeah, everyone used it. It was a great Machzor, all in one Machzor, by the way. It's amazing. Like that Machzor was like, 1,000 pages long. It had everything. And meanwhile, like, I don't know, it feels like the Machzors keep getting fatter and fatter, and it doesn't seem to match with the Birnbaum. But my favorite thing would be in the end, in the last few pages, it would give you all the future Rosh Hashanahs for years to come, all thy holidays. And it would end in like 1999. And so I figured like there wouldn't be any more Rosh Hashanah after 1999. That's all they had planned for. And we put it to bed. But the point is that the Machzor, not only is this cycle, this should also be for us. It should be a chazara for us every year. We should pick it up, and part of the tshuva process, part of the preparations that we make, it can't just be going up to your friends and saying, I'm so sorry for all the bad I did. It can't just be that we're going to do introspective work. All those are very important, but we also have to spend time doing a chazara, a Machzor on the prayer book itself. I like to think of the Machzor different than the Siddur in some ways, and that the Machzor really is like the like, I don't know what you'd call it. There used to be like these travel books back in the day. I don't know what you'd call them. Like we have the internet nowadays, so I don't know what they used to have. They had like these books that tell you all about these places. Travel guides. Thank you. I don't know. We have the internet, but once upon a time there was like these books, right? And you would look in these books, and it would give you all the highlights. It was like the roadmap of like what's to come, and you would learn. You flip through those things. You go on like Travelocity, or I don't know, wherever these websites are. You'll get all the highlights. And from the highlights, you can pick up some of the themes that exist. And so by us studying and looking deeply into the structure, we can figure out what are the main themes that we're supposed to learn about over the holidays. And to do that, I want to actually ask probably the most basic question I'm going to ask all night, which is what, in fact, are the names of Rosh Hashanah? I gave you one name, Rosh Hashanah. That's how it's called, Rosh Hashanah. But we know that Rosh Hashanah actually has other names. And I'm curious, and what I want us to keep in the back of our mind as we analyze, is how do the other names that the Torah or that Chazal refer to Rosh Hashanah as, how does that impact the themes and the tefillot themselves? So what other names do we know for Rosh Hashanah? Yom HaZikaron, good, day of remembrance. Good. So we'll talk a little bit more about remembrance. Remembrance being a big key. Remembrance actually in two ways. One is that we're asking God to remember us for good and remember all these other good things like that happen to the Avot and so on and so forth. But it's also an opportunity for us to do internal remembrance as well. So memory is a huge theme of the day. Good. We'll talk about that. What are other names? Yom Teruah. Excellent. The day of the Teruah. And we know the shofar plays a very important role. And we'll talk a little bit at some point about shofar vis-a-vis tefillah as well. Excellent. What's another name? Good. Yom Hadin, the day of judgment, right? Literally, it's a day where the Sefer HaZichronot and the book of memories and remembrance are open in front of us, in front of God. And he is literally penciling in our judgments for the coming year. And in that perspective, perhaps we can also see God maybe as like, as not just a judge, but also as like a ruler who is ruling over all of us. So let's now, with that, keeping that in the back of our head, let's look a little bit into the Machzor. So when we think about the structure, if we were to condense the Shemona Esreis throughout the entire year, every Shemona Esrei, every Amida, I shouldn't say Shemona Esrei because Shemona Esrei is actually the wrong term. Shemona Esrei refers to the 18 blessings that we make during the Amida during the week. But when I say Shemona Esrei, I mean the Amida prayer. So when it comes to the Amida, what if you were to give me like what is the high level structure of every Amida prayer, what would it look like? Those of you can unmute also, feel free. What's it start with? Okay, good. 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 So Ari is saying there's three blessings in the beginning that happens in every single Amida. There's also three blessings that happen at the end. Those are like universal, right? The three at the end are all about, we conclude with hope, that Hashem should rebuild the temple, with gratitude, and Sim Shalom with peace as well. So we end everything like that. And we start with the first three brachot as well. That is like the structure. And then we have like what I would call like the meat of the sandwich, right? You got two ends of your two pieces of bread. Then we have what's in the middle. And during the week, what's in the middle? It's all these requests, right? All these things we ask God to do. We want God to listen to us. We want God to rebuild Jerusalem. We want God to heal the ill. Those are all requests we make. What happens on Shabbos though? What happens on Shabbos or on Yom Tov? What's how does the Amida change relative to the week? It's about Shabbos. How many blessings are there though? There's only one extra bracha, correct? So a Shabbos Shemona Esrei has 7 blessings in it, right? So you have your first 3 and your last 3, and you have again the sandwich piece in the middle. And so what's that bracha going to be on Shabbat? It's going to be what? Mekadesh HaShabbat, right? Blessed are you, Hashem, Lord our God, who makes holy the Shabbat, right? Mekadesh HaShabbat. And when it is Yom Tov, what is like the middle piece of that sandwich? What do we say? Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. So we say the God who has made holy the Jewish people and the holidays as well, the time, right? So Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. That's the middle section. So all the Shemona Esreis fit into that exact same rubric throughout the whole year, which is we start with 3, we end with 3, and then like the theme for the day, Shabbos is the theme of Shabbos. Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim, the Zmanim, the holiday is the theme of the holiday, right? And that's the middle bracha. So that's how it's structured. What about when it comes to the tefillot of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Does it follow the same rubric or a different rubric? And I want to, for our purposes, and you'll see shortly, it actually doesn't matter. And I have to thank Dr. Isaac Chevelle for helping me hunt down a great source for this. But just trust me that there is no difference between Shachris and Musaf for our purposes. And by the way, if you were to look between Shachris and Musaf on a Shabbos or on a Yom Tov, you'll see it's the same structure also. You just have all the details about the Musaf, of all the Musaf offerings, right? And a bunch of verses that have to do with what they offered in the Musaf prayers or what happened in the Beis HaMikdash. But when it comes to the Shemona Esrei of Musaf on Rosh Hashanah in particular, let's put Yom Kippur on the side for a second. What does that actually look like? So let's look at our sources because the Mishnah is actually going to tell us. This is like an amazing thing. Like we take for granted, like, why is it that we daven X, Y, Z, or we do X, Y, and Z? It's because the Machzor tells us to. Well, no, it's not true. It's because Chazal told us, and you can see it here in box number 1. Gemara Rosh Hashanah. So we'll do the Mishnah, a little bit of the Gemara. So Seder bracha, these are the order of the brachos. Omer, we say avos, gvuros, kedushas Hashem. So the order of the blessings are such that we start avos and gvuros and kedushas Hashem. Does that sound similar to what we used to do all the time? So the bracha of Atah Kadosh, which during the regular part of the year ends with Baruch Atah Hashem Hakel HaKadosh, that third bracha, that's known as Kedushat Hashem, right? Hakel HaKadosh. We're talking about how God is, the holiness of the name, meaning God. So that is the first three bracha. Let's keep going. And included in that, in Kedushat Hashem, we also include Malchiot, and we don't blow the shofar at this point. And then more than that, Kedushat Hayom B'Tokea. Then we have this additional bracha known as Kedushat Hayom. The Kedushat Hayom bracha corresponds to the bracha of Mekadesh Shabbat or the bracha of Mekadesh Yisrael V'Azmanim. It's that same bracha. So again, similar ideas over here, but we've thrown in this idea of Malchios. Then Zichronos, another bracha. And then we Tokea, we blow. And then another bracha, Shofros, V'Tokea, we blow again. V'Omer Avoda, V'Hoda, Ober Kaskonim, Diver Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, we start the same way as the regular week. We end the same day as we do all year round, same deal. But in the middle, it's a little bit different in that we have three added sections called Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros. And earlier in the Mishnayos and in the Gemara, the Gemara talks about Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros. But we add these three in. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, how do we function? Where do we put them into this, into our formula? So Malchios actually is going to go in the middle of the third bracha, which is Atah Kadosh, that you normally say. And then Zichronos and Shofros will come after Kedushat Hayom, right? Let's open up our Machzor for 1 second and see, is that what we do in practice? Let's open up. You can find, I'm using a Koren Rosh Hashanah single volume. You got to tell them like what volume. The single volume Koren Machzor. And if you look at, I'm in the Chazar 1 second. I meant to go to the end of that. So if you look on page 515, 515, so you can see Avos right here. It just looks pretty much normal to us. Gehuros, right, with the Machayim 18, that's the next bracha on 517. And then we see on the top of page 519 something called Kedushat Hashem, right? Atah Kadosh v'Shimcha Kadosh u'Kedoshim B'chol Yom Yalu Chasava. And then what comes next? This long section here, which we'll talk about shortly. And then go to the bottom of 521. What happens right in the middle of that page? Baruch Atah Hashem HaMelech HaKadosh. So we say, we finished Kedushat Hashem. Have we put in Malchios yet? Do we say anything about Malchios? Not yet. Now after we've said Kedushat Hashem, now we go on to something called Kedushat Hayom. So this is the next part. And then it's Atah B'chartanu. This is all about what makes this day holy. And then you'll notice if you were to scooch ahead to the middle of like 525, towards the bottom of the page, where it begins with Aleinu, all of a sudden that is the section known as Malchiot. And then after the end of Malchios, on the bottom of page 531, you can see our bracha, which should look a little bit familiar to us, which is the bracha of what? Mekadesh Yisrael B'Yom HaZikaron. So this is actually different than what the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and instead we hold like a second opinion, which the Mishnah is about to bring us. The Mishnah brings us the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Amar Rabbi Akiva, Im Eino Tokeh LaMalchios Lama Hu Maskir. One of the reasons that we blow the shofar is, there's this deep connection between Malchios and blowing the shofar. They're interconnected, and so if they're interconnected, and you're going to put Malchios and you're going to put it into the third bracha. Instead of the middle bracha, the theme bracha, you're going to sneak it in there. So you have to blow shofar. You can't blow shofar there. So what does he suggest? Ela omer avos ukvuros ukudushas Hashem v'chlo malchios ukudushas hayom v'tokea zichronos v'tokea shofar v'tokea v'omer avoda hoda uber kaskon. So he says differently, and this is how we hold it. The formulation is 3 beginning brachot, 3 end brachot, right? Then we have the bracha over here of kedushat hayom, which is just like we have on every Shabbos. And then in addition, right afterwards, we have the 3 brachos of Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros. Rabbi Akiva says the Malchios bracha has to go somewhere. So where should it go? We're going to put it, the Malchios bracha with Kedushat Hayom, and we're going to put it together. What's the inference if Malchios is connected to Kedushat Hayom? What's the inference if of everything we've said until now is the bracha of Kedushas Hayom is the theme of the day? So then what's the takeaway here? That Malchios, if it's being placed inside the bracha of Kedushas Hayom, is the primary theme for the day, right? And so how many total brachos do we have? I had a whiteboard, it'd be a lot easier, but how many total brachos do we have in the Shemona Esrei for Rosh Hashanah? 9 brachos, correct, which is different than the 7 brachos. So we have to ask ourselves a number of what I think kind of basic questions. Number one, why don't we have 10 brachos? Once you're already going to 9, you might as well have 10. Why do you got to take Malchios and shmush it together with the bracha of Kedushas Hayom? Let it be its own bracha. There's plenty. We're not going anywhere. It's a long day, right? We've got all the time in the world. Give them each a little space, right? Why can't there be 10 brachos? Or another question. You'll notice if you look through Musaf, how is this Musaf different than the rest of the Musafs throughout the year? If you look carefully inside, you'll notice it's quoting psukim. Now you might say, one second, our entire text of the Siddur is basically psukim. It's taken from Tehillim and other places like that. That is true. Those are all true stories. These psukim, though, are fundamentally look a little bit different. What's the introductory way that each one of these psukim are said? V'ne'amar this, as it says in this pasuk, it says in that pasuk. That type of language, which is more prescriptive and makes it feel different than the structure of the regular Musaf, which also quotes psukim, but the psukim are all really about the Musaf and the Beis HaMikdash. Here we just have 10 random psukim. And in fact, the Rambam in box number 2 tells us this explicitly. It's just easier to see it here. Shalosh brachos themselves elu shel Rosh Hashanah. There's 3 middle brachos. Shein malchios zechonos v'shofros me'akavot zo et zo. They're not. It's not like a one-off. You have to say all of them. They are connected to each other. They're dependent on each other. And more than that, sarich lomar b'chol bracha mehen asarap psukim ein habracha. You have to recite in order to check the box. In order to go to the next level in the game. You have to say these 10 psukim. And what's the function here? Shlosha psukim min Torah, 3 verses from the Torah. Shlosha misefer Tehillim, 3 from Tehillim. Shlosha min Hanavim, 3 from the prophet. Ve'achad min Torah mashlim bo, and 1 from the Torah. That makes a total of 10. V'im hishlim b'navi yatza, and if you had the last pasuk be from the Navi, you'd fulfill your obligation. V'im amar pasuk echad min Torah, ve'echad min Tuim, ve'echad min Hanavim yatza. And if a person said just 3 verses, 1, 1, and 1, you would fulfill your obligation. Ve'afil amar, if at the minimum a person said of v'toratcha Hashem Elokeinu katuv lemor, ve'amar pasuk shel Torah v'hifsik shuv eno tzarich klum. And so at the minimum, there are other minimum thresholds for how you can fulfill your obligation, but you have to have some type of psukim. It's the psukim are not just throwaways. The psukim are not simply just these verses are not filler. They seem to be integral to the bracha itself. And if it's integral to the bracha and the brachos are ma'akev one to the next, they're dependent on one another and they represent the themes of the day. So that tells you the psukim themselves are important. What else stands out according to the Rambam unique about the psukim? You have to have a pasuk from every section of Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. Tehillim is part of Ketuvim. Yeah, so in other words, so Tehillim is part of Ketuvim. So you have to have a verse from all of Tanakh, basically, at the minimum, more or less, right? The minimum, you have to have one pasuk from all of Tanakh, right? Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, which is also a strange thing. We don't see any other type of obligation like that in any other tefillot. So what is it that we need to have these psukim? So we're also going to try to get to that as well. Other questions I think that we have to kind of unpack here are what is the significance of these brachot and why are they so important just in general? One other thing, let's just finish the Gemara, go back to box 1, and then I want to ask a few more questions, more fundamental questions. So you'll notice here in the Gemara says, Tanar Bana Menayin Shomrim Avos. So how do we know Avos? Shnamar, Havil Hashem Kelim, Menayin Shomrim Kippuros, Havil Hashem Kavaros, right? So the Torah, the Gemara is going to give us all the reasons here that we are going to say avos and gevuros from biblical psukim. And this is a much larger piece, but I cut it down. How do we know that we have to say these three things? It's from a Torah pasuk. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and Rabbi Kiva argue about how to read this pasuk. There's a pasuk that says Shabbaton Zichron Shura Mikra Kodesh, taken from Vayikra. Again, Shabbaton Zichron Shura Mikra Kodesh. And we see from this that we have all of the elements, depending on how you read it, all of the elements of Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofos from this pasuk, and therefore we have a biblical. So it depends on how you read it. Yeah, correct. So Mikra Kodesh, correct. So this is the Machlokas is whether or not where Kedushas Hayom is and where Kedushas Hashem is and where Malchios fits in. If Malchios is fitting into Kedushas Hayom, so Mikra Kodesh, right? So this is the Gemara goes on more about this, but yes, it's I ran out of paper space basically. So the question is, why do we need a specific limud? Why do we need a pasuk to teach us about Kedushas Hayom, Mikra Kodesh? Why do we need a pasuk for Rosh Hashanah specifically? And let me sharpen my question a little bit. If you look in the Gemara in Sukkah in box number 3, and Rashi, which is the next box on the back of the page, box 4, you'll see here that the Gemara itself very explicitly, the Gemara itself, Tan Rabbanan Hayu lefanav mitzvot harbe Omer Baruch Hashem mitzvot Rabbi Yehuda Omer Baruch HaKoach Harecha B'fnei Atzmam. And let me just jump to where I want to go. I'll just say it outside. I don't want to go too far into this Gemara in Sukkah. The Gemara in Sukkah here says we learn the halacha of Kedushas Hayom from this pasuk of Baruch Hashem. And so we learn from this pasuk that there is a mitzvah every single holiday, every single Shabbat, that we're supposed to do Kedushas Hayom. So why is it that Rosh Hashanah needs a special pasuk? Why can't we learn Rosh Hashanah from the Gemara in Sukkah and say, yes, every holiday, whether it's Rosh Hashanah or Simchas Torah or Pesach or Sukkot or whatever the holiday is, or Shabbos, we learn from this Gemara in Sukkah that you have to make a special bracha of Kedushas Hayom, recognizing the holiness of the day. Why do we need a special pasuk of Shabbaton Zichron Shura Mikra Kodesh to teach us this when it comes to Rosh Hashanah? It's a strange thing, right? And what's interesting is that's not the only difference that we'll find, for example, between Shabbos and Yom Tif, and Rosh Hashanah. Take a look in Shulchan Aruch in box number 5. What happens if a person davens the weekday Amida on Shabbos and not the Shabbos Amida? I'll speak for myself. I've been there before. Got so much kavanah, and I just start davening, and I'm like, and that's like slach, and I'm just in the middle of the Shemona Esrei, and I realize, oh wait, it's Shabbos, time out. Let me go back and look at my siddur, which is like a big, we should all use our siddur, myself included. But the Shulchan Aruch has interesting halacha. Mishi kalel tefillah shachol b'Shabbat, v'lo yizkir shel Shabbat lo yatsa. If you do not say something about Shabbat in your weekday Amida that you prayed on Shabbat, you don't fulfill your obligation. You have to recognize that it's Shabbat. However, im hizkir shel Shabbat b'toch yud chet, if in the middle of the Amida, the Shemona Esrei, again, you're davening a weekday Shemona Esrei on Shabbat. If you make any mention of Shabbat, right? Afa pi shelo kava bracha l'Shabbat, even though you didn't say the bracha of Mekadesh HaShabbat, you didn't say the bracha. Guess what? Yatsa. You fulfill your obligation. You actually don't have to do anything except for just make mention of it. That's the halacha when it comes to Shabbos, right? And the Rama adds more to this. When it comes to, yeah?
Well, the Haggadah does exactly the same thing. I realize the Haggadah is much later.
Good. Pesach Matzah Mara, good. Right, you have to say these 3 things. Yeah.
So I'm just, with Rosh Hashanah, I don't remember whether there's a problem with the calendar. One of the things you've got to be sure is which day it is. And the old times, it's a lot harder to ascertain that. So I'm not sure if there's an element.
There is an element. There is an element about that, which is the bracha of Kedushas Hayom is important partially because who is it that ultimately like sets the date of the holiday? Mankind sets the date of the holiday, right? We set it, right? Right. So Mekadesh Yisrael Vazmanim, right? So like we set the dates, but God is the one. That's the bracha. Mekadesh Shabbat is actually different. Shabbat, God sets Shabbat, but the holidays we set it, right? Mekadesh Yisrael Vazmanim. God sanctifies us, who sanctifies the time, basically, right? So you're totally right. The Haggadah is a different story altogether because it's not a,
It's much later. So
not just that, it's not a tefillah. Like this is actually tefillah. So you have to, but on Rosh Hashanah, like we just said, if you skip a piece, the Rambam said, no dice, go back. Like you don't get like, in fact, if you forget Hamelach HaKadosh, you go back. You messed the whole thing about Shabbos. You messed the whole Shemona Esrei. You said the whole other wrong to Shemona Esrei. But oh, by the way, as long as I say the word Shabbos and I reference Shabbos, I'll be okay. That's not the case for Rosh Hashanah. I can say God's kingship, wherever it might be, all I want. If I don't say the bracha the way it's meant to be, if I miss out on Malchios, Zicharos, and Shofros, which are Makif, so I'm going to have a problem. And so Kedushas Hayom and Rosh Hashanah is special and different, which is why we need a different pasuk. We can't learn from the Gemara and Sukkah. We can't use that same pasuk of Baruch Hashem. We can't use that pasuk. We have to use a different one because it is fundamentally different. This pasuk of Shabbaton is significant, and it tells us that the tefillot themselves on Rosh Hashanah are actually fundamentally different. And it's actually more than that. Like the Gemara in Megillah also quotes the same idea here in box number 6 of like where we know like the beginning sections of Avos and Gavuros and Kedushas Hashem. But even on Rosh Hashanah itself, those brachos actually take on a very different nature altogether. In fact, we know that if a person, like I said, skips Hamelach HaKadosh, then you have to go back. And so the Gemara, the Rambam here in box number 7, and the Kesef Mishnah says something remarkable. This is so cool. So the Rambam says as follows: Yesh mekamot shnagulo sif b'aseret yamim elu bivracha rishon zachrenu l'chaim. So we know that on Rosh Hashanah Kippur we have this custom between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, which starts with Rosh Hashanah. We insert zachrenu into the prayers itself, right? So that we zachrenu l'chaim, and then we also add in Mikamocha. And we also add in Tov and also B'Sefer Chaim at the end of davening as well. So we add all these things, right? V'chein yesh mekamot shnagu losif b'aser ganim ilu bracha shlishi v'chein tein pachtucha. Some had the custom to add more to the third bracha, and so on and so forth. But look at the Kesef Mishnah. The Kesef Mishnah says as follows, based on this Rambam, as he's talking about the yesh mekamot, or some places who do this. Just read the part that's bold and underlined. כשם שחתימתן של ראש השנה ושל יום הכיפורים משונה משאר הימים, in the same way that we end the bracha differently on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur during this time period and the rest of the year, also kach tfilatam mishuna. The brachos themselves, the prayers themselves, are in fact totally different. And the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah tells us about these themes of Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros. When we think about them, we might think about them as simply just being insertions into the Machzor, the same way Musa, Musaf's long. Okay, so we have an extra long Musaf on Rosh Hashanah. It's a big day. No, you're missing the point. The Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros, they are literally the themes of the day. The names of the day tie back to them. And in fact, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah tells us something remarkable. What would be the equivalent on other holidays? For example, like, I'll just read it to you. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mishim Rabbi Kiva Mibnei Ma'amar Torah Havu Omer Pesach. Why do we bring the Omer on Pesach? Mibnei Shah Pesach Zman Tepuahi. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Havu Lefanai Omer Pesach Kadei Shibarech Lachem Tzvat Shabbat Sadot. So we bring the Omer because it ties into the themes of the day. Mibnei Ma'amar Torah Havu Shtei Alechem Atzer. Why do we bring the Shtei Alechem, the 2 loaves of bread on Atzer and Shavuos? Mibnei Shah Tzeret Zman Perot Ha'ilanu, because the time of Atzeret is a time for the fruits that grow on the tree, right? So therefore, you should bring for me to those before me on Shavuos, so the fruits that grow on a tree will also be blessed by you. So why do we do nusach hamayim? Why do we do the water, pouring of the water on the altar when it comes to sukkahs? So Amakash Baruch Hu, nasu lefanai mayim b'chag. You should do this. You should pour the water on sukkahs. Why? So that you should be blessed with good rain throughout the year. And why should we say Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros on Rosh Hashanah? Why? It's for exactly this reason. Kingship, Malchios, you'll crown me as king over you. Zichronos, that your remembrance will rise before me for good. And with how do you do it? With the shofar. So Malchios, Zichronos, and shofar are like on the same level as bringing the Korban Omer. It's on the same level as bringing the Shtei Halechem. This is not simply, like I said, filler. It is like the functional theme of the day of Malchios, Zichronos, and shofros, and it impacts the entire like structure. And in fact, the theme of the day of Malchios, which we said is tied to Kedushat Hayom, if you actually look through the first three brachot, according to the Kesef Mishnah, the tefillot themselves are just fundamentally different. If you look at the first three brachos, guess what? They actually have everything to do with kingship. What do we say? We say Melech Ozer Umoshia Umagen. The word Melech is in that first bracha. Melech Memit Umechaya. Right? It's the king who takes life, but also brings back life. And then how do we end the third bracha during this time period? HaMelech HaKadosh. So those three brachot are fundamentally different. Everything about this Shemona Esrei is unlike the regular tefillot that we have throughout the year, not just in terms of its length. The theme is pervasive throughout every one of its brachot, and they are me'akev zo et zo to the point where you can't just like do a throwaway, you actually have to say the brachos themselves. So even the common brachos that we'll make all year round are fundamentally enhanced and are fundamentally different when it comes to our tefillot. And so when we open up our Machzor and we start to daven and we start with those brachot that feel common to us, maybe we're not looking at our Machzor because, okay, I'll open my Machzor when it comes to the bracha of Malchios or Zichronos. Those are new words. But the first three brachos, I know that. I say it every day, 3 times a day. They're fundamentally different on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and we need to treat them differently. The theme of Malchios emerges from it enormously. Let's go onwards here a little bit. Let's go back to our Mishnah for a second. So the Mishnah articulated a machlokas, and I want to spend a minute just talking about something really neat. The Mishnah articulated that the bracha of Kedushas Hayom, Malchios is either in the bracha of Kedushas Hashem or it's in the bracha of Kedushas Hayom. But we said we don't have 10 brachos. We have 9 brachos, right? That's what we have. We have 9 brachos. What's really interesting, actually, is that there is an opinion that perhaps we should be saying this not just in Musaf. Remember, I told you, trust me, that Musaf is not different. The Baal HaMaor actually brings down an opinion. If you turn to box number 10 and box number 11, the Baal HaMaor actually brings an opinion that says the custom was to say the 9 brachos throughout the entire day of Rosh Hashanah. You thought it was bad. You had to have like a super long Shemona Esrei. You needed like comfy shoes because you're standing for so long. No. It's actually every Shemona Esrei. The rest of the Shemona Esreis that we daven, what formula do they follow? How many brachos do we have? 7 brachos. 3 in the beginning, 3 in the end, and we have Melech al Kol Haaretz, Nekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. So, Yom HaZikaron. Sorry, thank you. We have an enhanced version. We have an enhanced version of the Kedushas Hayom that we have during a regular holiday. It's Melech al Kol. To talk about God's kingship again, the theme of the day. So there's 7 brachos, and Musaf has 9. So the Baal HaMaor says, you can look here in box 10, and we don't have time to really go through it, but it's so cool. 9 brachos, all of it. Malchil, Zichronos, and Shofros. You think, again, what I'm trying to emphasize here is that Malchil, Zichronos, Shofros are not just some Musa thing. It is everything. It is embedded. The Balmor is bringing down this custom. It was embedded into everything, and more than that. Interestingly enough, in case you want to see the other side of this, it was actually a custom. You can look in the Baal HaMaor here in box 11, and also the drasha for Rosh Hashanah from the Rambam as well, that there was a custom to actually only do 7 brachot when it came to Musaf, and the Chazan in the Shliach Tzibur in the repetition did 9, and this is about a machokas the Ramban brings down about Rabbi Gamliel about what the purpose of the Shliach Tzibur's repetition is. What's fascinating about our davening on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, different than the rest of the year, is that the Chazara itself is not simply a repetition of the exact same words that we had. We fill it with Putim and other things as well. When we have a regular Shabbos Shemona Esrei, what is it like? There's not an extra section in my siddur. I just go back to the beginning of what I said silently and I just say it out loud. And so the function of what a chazan does and what obligations you may or may not be fulfilling by saying those brachot is a source of interest. I just want to spend 30 seconds telling you that there's many, many things that I love about our shul and our amazing members. But one of my favorite things I love about our shul is that we have such amazing scholars in our shul, such amazing resources like Dr. Isaac Chevelle. And literally on Sunday, he's not on tonight, couldn't be on tonight. He has another engagement. As we're walking out, he says to me, what are you going to talk about on Wednesday night? So I shared with him a little bit of what I'm thinking. He says, oh, and I mentioned to him, I had seen the source, but I couldn't find the source. He says, no problem, I'll be happy to hunt it down for you. And then an hour later, not only did I get one source, I got like 5 pages of sources, which were just amazing. And so it's one of the real gems of our shul, is that we have so many amazing people here who are great resources. And so I'd want to give a special kudos to Dr. Chevelle, who gave me these resources. And by the way, fun fact, Dr. Chevelle's father in a red book published by Magid, recently republished, I think, by Magid, Dr. Chevelle's father translated this drasha for Rosh Hashanah for the Ramban. And like, if you're bored over Rosh Hashanah, read it. It'll enhance your davening. We could have a 3-part series just on that, and I'll just leave it at that. Okay, let's ask one last question. I told you I really like this topic, and what was that? Yeah, if you keep reading, you'll see it. Yeah, it's 8:43 and I'm over time. So, but it's like I said, any one of these could be a whole share. I wanna maybe conclude tonight with just one answering one last question, which ties into this question, which is, well, so the Balmor is saying that all the Shemona Esrei should be 9 brachos. What is this 9 brachos business? Like, what is 9 brachos that is so significant that we should have 9 brachos? Is 10 going to kill us? Quite the opposite. 10, as we'll see, hopefully, if we get to the psukim, and we'll analyze why it's 10 psukim and why it comes from all the sections of Tanakh. 10 we know is like a pretty significant number, right? I said, bros, like 10 is a big number. So why stop at 9? Give us 10, right? Like, is it like, it's always whenever you're short of 1, it's always like, well, it's 9 plus 1 more because we have something to reach for. 9 because 9 plus God makes 10. Like, but why is there 9? Well, the Gemara actually is going to tell us this explicitly. Take a look in box number 13, and I wanna end tonight with a question, and then maybe that will make you want to come back next week. So, Hani Teisha de Rosh Hashanah Keneged Mi. Like, why do we daven? Again, we spent all this time talking about Malchus, Zichronos, and Shofros. Well, why? Why are there 9 brachos? Why not 10? Or why even make Malchus, Zichronos, Shofros? Why even have this? I'm Rabbi Yitzchak Demin Kartignin. So Rabbi Yitzchak of Kartignin says as follows: Keneged Tisha Azkarot She'amra Chana B'Tfilata. It corresponds to 9 times that God's name is mentioned when Chana makes her prayer. The Amar Mar, as Mar says, the Rosh Hashanah, Nifkida, Sarah, Rachel, V'Chana. Sarah, Rachel, and Chana were remembered on the day of Rosh Hashanah, and because all 3 of them were remembered, so therefore, our Shemona Esrei models after Chana's is modeled after the number of times that God's name is mentioned in Chana's prayer. So what's probably the biggest question that we can ask on this Gemara?
Why does tefillah?
Okay, why Chana's tefillah? Good. So let me strengthen your question a little bit, which is, okay, so there's three. So if you want to say that it's all about the fact that God remembered these three women, so okay, what about, why can't we count the number of times God's name can be found in a passage about Sarah? I don't understand. Why can't we count the number of times that God's name is mentioned when it comes to Rachel in some passage? Like,
I would go with Eliyahu.
but I mean, let's say that the Gemara is right, that we want to reference the Imahot, which I think is there's a lot of good things to unpack just in that idea as well. Like, what is it about Chana that makes her more fitting than everybody else? That's number one. On its most basic level, if you actually look at the Tefillah of Chana, which is in box 14, the next source, the Yerushalmi, I didn't bring you the source. The Yerushalmi says that the reason why the primary reason why we reference Chana's prayer is if you look in Pasuk Yud of Chana's prayer in Shmuel, Hashem, can't read it, it's too small. Yechatu merivav alav bashamayim yareim Hashem yadin afsei aretz. What is part of her prayer? It's about what? The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. And because her prayer has something to do with judgment, so therefore it's fitting for us, the Yerushalmi says, for us to reference Chana. So hold on. You mean to tell me that there isn't another verse? There aren't any other psukim? Like, we have a whole liturgy we have a whole Tanakh of other places that we can find. So if you want to say it's because Chana was answered, okay, but Sarah was answered, so is Rachel. So let's find something neat from one of their prayers or one of their sections in Tanakh. And if you want to say, according to the Yerushalmi, that it has to do with this pasuk, that she references judgment itself, so I don't understand. You mean to tell me there's no other psukim of judgment? I can tell you that's not true. We have an entire Machzor filled with many psukim that have to do with God's judgment of the world. So what is it about Chana's prayer that the Gemara is saying serves as the fundamental backbone of the nine, and serves as the structure for basically the themes of the day? What is it about Chana's prayer? And I guess next week we'll dive a little bit deeper into Chana's prayer. And then also next week we'll delve even deeper into is talking about Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros. Why those three? Like, why isn't there a fourth or a fifth? Like, what is it about those three? We take for granted that there are three, but maybe there should be more or less. Why those three? And then we'll start to delve into the sections themselves also next week to understand what each of the themes actually mean. You say Malchios, that we're coronating God as king. Well, what does that actually mean? So we'll talk about that next week as well. Okay, we'll stop here. I hope to see everyone back same time, same place, same channel next week. Have a good night, everyone.
The only thing I can think of is
Thank